Dear Minister Hasani, Your Excellency, dear Besa Shahini, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome all of you here tonight for a very special occasion, a discussion with Mr. Hasani to discuss EU enlargement. This is a particularly fitting time to be reflecting on the topic and its challenges. Not only are we a little over a week away from the fast approaching EU elections, or should I say slowly approaching because the wait has been long for some of us, but also on the 1st of May, we commemorated the 20th anniversary of the EU's fifth enlargement, also known as the Eastern Enlargement, which welcomed a record 10 new countries into the EU. And we now discuss exactly what these 20 years have done. The enlargement of the EU from its 6 founding members to the group of 27 that compose it today has undoubtedly brought peace, stability, and prosperity to both standing EU countries and newly joining members alike. However, this topic has nevertheless been contentious and uncertain. Recently, discussions around EU enlargement have been entangled with debates about EU reform, and June's EU election will certainly have an impact on the way forward, as the results from the ballot box will reshape the leadership of the EU institutions. The current enlargement process with the Western Balkans has been underway for a long time, but progress has in many areas stalled. While the EU has announced Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova as countries for EU accession in the last fall, the path ahead for these countries is nevertheless uncertain and full of obstacles. Albania's perspective can shed light on these challenges, as it is applied for EU membership, another anniversary 15 years ago in April 2009, and was granted candidate status in 2014. That's around 10 years ago. So it can be very long. It has its hands of challenges, and we're very eager to hear from your perspective what you think these are. However, recent events in Ukraine and Georgia remind us why the European project is so important. Not as a regulatory enterprise full of conditionality and reforms that have to be met, but as a promise of peace, prosperity, and stability, and an increasingly, or maybe has always been, a dangerous world. In today's discussion, we will be focusing on a perspective that we very often fail to pay attention to, at least I can say this here in Germany, that of the candidate countries. We're lucky to have our 2 speakers, Minister Hasani and Besa Shahini, here with us today, as they're extremely qualified to discuss EU enlargement policy in particular, give us the important perspective from the Western Balkans, and from Albania in particular, which I understand is not just like the Western Balkans, is also a very special case, and we would like to understand what makes Albania, in this case, something that we can learn from. Igli Hasani currently serves as Albania's Minister for Europe and European Affairs. He has previously worked as the coordinator of the OSCE economic and environmental activities, as well as held a variety of positions in the Albanian government, including as Director of NATO and Foreign Relations, Director of Euro-Atlantic Integration, Secretary General in the Ministry of Defense. Our own, may I say, Besa Shahini is currently working as the Henrik Enderlein Fellow at the Jacques Delors Centre. She's previously worked as the Minister and Deputy Minister for Education, Sports and Youth in Albania, and received her master's degree of public policy from the Hertie School. I would like to thank both of you for taking the time to be with us today, in particular you, Minister, during what is a very busy meeting schedule for your visit. Let me also extend some word of gratitude. First, I would like to thank our partners at the Mercator Foundation for their support of the Henrik Enderlein Fellowship and of this event. Also, I'd like to thank my colleagues of the Jacques Delors Centre, who have as always put together a wonderful event with everything that is part of it. So thank you to the entire team. I'm looking at you, but please pass it on. And thank you, of course, as always, also to our communications team and everybody who makes events at the Hertie School possible. It is really a privilege to be with everybody tonight, to have the opportunity to have this conversation. The discussion will be moderated by the co-director of the Jacques Delors Centre, Johannes Lindner, And the only thing I have left before we get started is to tell you that we will record the session. So if you're asking a question, know that there will be a trace of it. If you don't want to be recorded, don't ask a question, but I encourage you to ask questions. It's not a live stream, but we will make it available afterwards. And without further ado, Minister, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Ms. Woll. Many thanks to you and the Jacques Delors Centre for organizing this event and finding time also for me to engage with you. It's important that not only the ministers have given their so-called precious times, but it's also the time that you are giving and the audience that you are giving to ministers like me to be here today. With your permission, I will do the boring part of 5-7 minutes of a speech, but I'll be very happy to engage with all of you. And then maybe we will explore more and more possibilities of how do we think and where we can move forward together. But it's a great honor to be here and to speak today about the state of the EU integration for Albania, the state of regional cooperation in the Western Balkans, the complex dynamics of the region, but also to touch upon the future of the EU enlargement policy and the geopolitical situation in our continent. Although there is very lot in the plate, these factors are interdependent, and even a tiny country in the southeast part of our continent must face a complex challenge when striving to make our way towards the European Union or keeping our region safe and prosperous. Putting the debate in context, let me make some important remarks about the EU integration process of Albania. These explains not only our last 3 decades, but also our current internal and external policies, regional endeavors, and our future objectives as well. I strongly think that Albania in the EU is a synonym for a free and prosperous country. EU integration is about respect for values and strong institutions. It also means prosperity, stability, and peace in the wider regional European context. It might sound strange to repeat it constantly, but Albanians are among the most pro-European nations in the continent, with over 90% of support towards EU integration. And the EU membership has always been one of the first priorities of every Albanian government elected since the fall of communism, and it was never questioned by political parties or social communities. I always make the joke of saying that Evropi, in the old ancient term of the ancient Greeks, used to be exactly that area of the world where Albanians, Macedonians, Serbs, Montenegrins, Bosnians, and others used to live, exactly on the northern part of where our Greek friends lived in the continent. And it seems that that old Evropi wants to be part of the Europe, wants to be part of the European Union, wants to be part of a reality that, at least for the Albanians, we have been distant for 555 years. 500 years of belonging to the Ottoman Empire by force, 50 years of belonging to a cruel communist regime by force, and 5 years of very difficult transformation in the initial years of our democracy. But since 1991, these realities have never been questioned, as I said, and everybody that represents the Albanian people in the Albanian parliament does not think differently, does not think that there is another way except that of being part of the European Union. And it is the EU that is the largest trading and investment partner of our country. It is the biggest donor, and we are part of the European Union in many senses. Today, Albanians can freely travel within the Schengen zone. We have a stable frame for dialogue, for developing relations, to move on with the accession negotiations. And we have already started to build gradual integration, free roaming zone, for example, with the Western Balkan countries and partly with the EU. but we are also applying for membership to the single euro payments area. But how far did we really get? Where are we today with the accession process? Based on the assessment of the European Commission in 2023, the result of a very successful screening process, the positive consent of 25 member states for Albania, there is the possibility to open the benchmarks for the fundamental cluster. And I'm very confident that we will make progress this year, in 2024. We have 2 stumbling blocks in front of us out of 27. 25 are fully supporting us. We have to smoothen some corners in the weeks to come. The political progress is very important, and advancing in the accession negotiations really shows how serious the EU approach is to the region. In the last 18-20 months, we made huge progress. Albania and North Macedonia started the accession negotiations. Bosnia and Herzegovina became a candidate country, and Kosovo received the visa-free regime, as well as it applied for membership. Meanwhile, the geopolitical imperative, our strategic compass, prevailed as the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine has triggered a completely new dynamic everywhere, including at the EU. Regional stability and peace are relevant not only for the EU, but they can serve as an important priority in decision-making in the EU when it comes to enlargement. But on the other hand, with regards to Albania only, there was no single and positive political decision in these files in 2023. The political process was halted despite the positive assessments. And it has given an indication that the geopolitical imperative might not be as sustainable priority as we thought and we hoped for. Don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating for unjustified progress and benefits here. What you may see in my country on the ground is that new institutions were created and are operational in the fight against corruption and organized crime. The judicial reform is steadily progressing by vetting the personnel and creating the framework for new applicants. The country is being transformed on the daily basis. We consider the accession negotiations as a knowledge transfer. The preparation in becoming a member of the EU might be time-consuming, but through transformation we can only progress, and this is something that we cannot and shall not avoid. But still, without a credible and predictable path, the level of ambition might fall. The public administration can easily scramble. Keeping the direction could be more and more difficult. Because when we look at the region in the entirety of the Western Balkans, we're talking about countries that have had, in our best, 33 years of democracy, and 33 years are just a generation. 33 years of trying to develop democracies, liberal democracies, based on free market economies and the rule of law. Meanwhile, others have been far, far, far more advanced than us. And it's easy, again, that going back in scrambling down all that process can be a reality that if we don't pay the necessary attention, realities can change. The enlargement fatigue has started to wear off somewhere in the Western Balkans, but has not reached Albania yet. But you may see also its effects in the region among the people and some countries. Losing the focus of integration can push the region again back to history. And we all remember the recent past and the horrible perspective it had not even 3 decades ago. The complex dynamics of the Western Balkans are becoming even more difficult if we take the European perspective away. Regional cooperation has to be fueled by the promise of EU membership, and reconciliation should be facilitated by a credible integration path. I strongly believe Albania is and will continue to be a stabilizing factor in the Western Balkans, but we can talk about it later on. Albanians living in the neighboring countries, not only in Albania proper, constantly vote in favor of stability and the Euro-Atlantic orientation of the countries where they are engaged and they live. And if I may say, Europe is in our genes. Looking forward, we can identify at least some indications of how relations will unfold in 2024 and beyond. First, the political files and accession negotiations. The advancement should be made based on merits to keep the process, as I mentioned earlier, credible, predictable, and dynamic to maintain the level of ambitions of the governments and societies of the Western Balkans. Second, the discussion on the next strategic agenda, the political program of the new EU institutions for the period 2024-2029, can show us the priorities of the EU for the upcoming 5 years, and I hope the enlargement remains to be there. And third, debate on the new multi-annual financial framework, most likely starting in a year time, will give us an indication of how seriously the EU is considering our accession for the next term. If the budget contains the possibility of financing the newcomers, it means that we might have a chance to join the EU within a reasonable time frame. But what I see, and I'll stop here, is that many actors and factors have decided to stall and decided to see things with a little bit of pause in these particular times in the Western Balkans. Everybody is waiting for the results of the European elections in almost 2 weeks. Everybody is waiting for the results of the US elections in November this year and predicting many realities on some fantasies. Everybody is waiting for the new institutions that the EU elections will provide again in November this year. And we have had elections in the region or new governments that have been composed or upcoming elections that are fuming with lots of national rhetoric, which once again bring more and more uncertainties to what we're doing. In the end, if we don't continue to work, if we don't continue to engage, we will simply lose 1 year. And 1 year might not be a lot in the life of a population or of a society, but might mean a lot for its future. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your words, and I'm grateful that we are joined now by Besa, adding your expertise and also your analysis to the words that the minister left us with, and his assessment. Now, just a word on commercial. You allow me, Minister, on what Besa did. There is a QR code here of a very nice mini-series where she has looked at the accession process from the perspective of the different Balkan countries and has really shed light on the different aspects by combining the different aspects with the different countries. And that's why I think it's useful to have that common conversation, because we have the Albanian perspective as well as the perspective of the other countries. So Besa, thanks for joining us. I want to start maybe with you and combine what Igli, you said about the predictability, the credibility, the merit-based accession process. And want to ask you, Besa, what is your assessment of the accession process so far? What is maybe a question of how the institutional setup of the accession process is done? What is a question more of political will? Where do you see, or would you want to see some progress or some improvements?
Thank you, Johannes. Thank you, Minister, for being with us today. And thank you, Cornelia, for opening. I'm very happy to have this conversation with everyone this afternoon. So I've done a lot of interviews. I've created this mini podcast series on the Western Balkans because I thought it was important to remind ourselves a little bit about the context of each one of the countries, where the countries were 20, 30 years ago, how much progress was actually achieved in this time, and what still needs to be done in order to really keep the progress and changes moving forward, right? Now, having said that, the Western Balkans is not progressing as fast as we would like to see. We, the people who live there, we, the people who work there. Economically, there is now a new study that was just published by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development that noted that it would take, at this rate of progress, it would take about 70 years for the Western Balkans to catch up with the average living standards of the EU. The Central and Eastern European countries that have joined the EU in the previous enlargement waves were in this position some 20 years ago, or maybe even a bit longer. But they have started the accession process, and today they have almost fully converged, even to the point that countries like Czechia or Slovenia have more output per person today than some of the older members like Greece or Spain. And it is undisputed that the EU accession process has helped in achieving this kind of economic growth and development because of the nature of the EU accession process, which does a couple of things. It makes the countries reform, do an overhaul of all institutions, the entire legal system, all standards. And this type of work really transforms the countries and invites the type of investment that then leads to economic growth and development. Now, 2004, this was a different time. It was a time of optimism. Students were reading Fukuyama's End of History, the idea that in this battle of ideologies, the one that has won is democratic values, market economy. And at that time, the Western Balkans was promised a similar road. It said, all right, coming out of wars, this is the way forward for the Western Balkans. In 2004, North Macedonia applied for membership to the EU. In 2020, it was given the green light to start the accession, but hasn't effectively started negotiations yet. There's many reasons for why we have this process, that effectively most of the countries in the Western Balkans have not opened accession talks. We have to take into account that Europe was in a crisis. There was a financial crisis, Brexit happened, Greece debated to leave Europe for a short bit back there. The migration crisis did not help, right? So as the EU was looking inward and trying to figure out how to move out of these crises, enlargement did not remain a priority. And I think the result is what we see today in the region. Bilateral disputes that then came up as well, or in parallel, also are not helping. Today, there is, countries can block a candidate country's sort of path, European path for issues that are not necessarily directly related to EU accession. Again, I mentioned North Macedonia. It was blocked by Greece over the name Macedonia. It changed the name. Then France kind of pressed pause on enlargement for a bit because they wanted to change the enlargement methodology. And now it's Bulgaria who's saying, look, you need to deal with the Bulgarian minority and the teaching of history before you can open accession talks. It is potentially legitimate request, but it doesn't have to happen at this point before North Macedonia even starts opening the talks on discussing how to enact rule of law reforms, which are essential and extremely important for both the region but also the EU. My worry today, as we're discussing now, all these proposals for staged accession, or maybe joining the single market first and then thinking about membership later, or having these loose associations in the form of European political community. The worry in the Western Balkans, and I agree, is that maybe all of these proposals will keep membership even further at bay, which inevitably will not allow Western Balkans to benefit, like the Central and Eastern European member states, from an enlargement process that has the transformative power, the support, financial and human capital, but also the signal out there that here is a region that is becoming more and more stable, has the potential to grow economically, and is inviting investment that will lead eventually to economic growth and development. So this is my sort of slightly more glum perspective when you look at the entire region, where it is today, and how risky it is to not revive the enlargement process, the process that we know has worked in the past for the more recent members of the EU.
Let's maybe come to the sort of financial dimension in a second, but come first to the point you've made on bilateral vetoes. And I want to understand a bit better what that means for the individual country. You mentioned the case of North Macedonia. Albania has also had its experience on the bilateral vetoes. How relevant, Minister, do you see is that as a feature in the accession process? How much would that help? Besa said, let's give the veto power later on. Let's start the discussion. Let's not wait until the technical talks can really progress, and therefore give too much room to individual veto players. So, what's your own experience? If you don't mind me asking a more specific question, we're picking up here, some of you who know the region better, the specific case of the Greek Neo Demokratia having chosen a candidate that has been elected mayor of a South Albanian city that has been in prison for vote rigging. And so we have now a sort of a big affair around because he's from a Greek minority, around this dispute between Albania and Greece. So your own experience with this, as well as this as an example of the veto power that we see.
I've always thought that the European Union was created to leave behind all the historical issues that France and Germany initially had between them, and others followed suit. And I've always thought that the European Union, the European community, was created for better mechanisms that might bring the region, whoever it was and however it was developed, to a better position. And this has been the case not only for France and Germany, if I may, but also with all its members up until now. It seems that there is a new trend to use bilateral issues, historical issues, to block the path of the candidates. And Albania has been facing a situation since a year ago for an individual mayor candidate that is now a mayor-elect in a region where I come from, where my mother comes from, in a region I grew up, and my cousins, I don't know, but my cousins voted for or against him. I don't know which side did they pick. But for a an individual that was caught on vote buying. And it was caught on vote buying, and it is being processed by a judicial system that was created through the free will of the Albanian people with the great assistance of the European Union. And since the first day, the Albanian government has been clear on saying and acting that this is a judicial issue that belongs to the Albanian judicial system, and there are no possibilities of interference from the Albanian government and other governments. Now it seems that this has been and will continue to be political. But there is one element that I will constantly say, not only for the case that we have with our friends and cousins in Greece. You don't pick your neighbor, you don't pick your family member. We live there, we coexist there, therefore we have to find solutions to move forward. And there is one particular sentence that I constantly say to all my interlocutors, at least since I got this office. Whatever the claims are on the situation with that particular individual, and whatever the implications are that have made one particular member of the European Union blocking Albania's opening of the negotiations, everybody should not forget that by opening the negotiations, by opening the first cluster is on fundamentals, is on human rights and fundamental freedoms. Therefore, whoever wants to check and make Albania delivering more should let Albania have the initial chapters opened and start checking what Albania has been doing and has to do. And this is the dynamic that everybody should understand. I also understand, because we are not living in bubbles, I also understand very well that there have been several electoral campaigns last year, but also we are entering an important final stage of the campaign towards the EU Parliament elections. But the future of countries and the future of realities should not be based on the results of a particular election, because the implications will continue to be bigger and bigger, and the results might be surprising and might create unhappinesses that we should all avoid.
You mentioned that judicial reform, both in your speech and now. What has been your experience of the judicial reform that you've done for the reform process that will need to continue more generally in terms of bringing Albania to the European acquis?
The judges and prosecutors up until 5 to 7 years ago were typical judges and prosecutors of the most rudimental legal system that reminded me of pre-independence Albania. A classical, corrupt system where you had to bribe and pay to get some results. And since the start of the judicial reform, we strongly believe that this has been the most profound and the strongest reform that the Albanian society and the Albanian system has had since its independence. And the numbers show it themselves. The judges and prosecutors that up until 5 to 7 years ago were considered the most corrupt public officials in Albania now are considered by the public opinion as the most reliable, just because of this reform. And we're talking about people, we're not talking about machines, we're not talking about mechanisms, we're not talking about applications, we're talking about people. And people have started to deliver differently. People have started to deliver rightly, and those that couldn't deliver properly have left the system.
How many people have you? I mean, how much was the turnover, the exchange of within?
70% of the judges, and more than 70% of the judges and prosecutors have left.
Have left.
Have left the system. This also, in a certain moment, created a small issue with the European Union. There were questions in 2018, 2019, and Besa probably remembers. There were some member states questioning the fact that we were lacking the numbers of judges and prosecutors, but here we are. And trust has returned to the public, and people are seeing by themselves that this is a mechanism that is functioning independently. The government is not putting its own hands, whatever government is in power. And the results are so clear and so evident that the right working environment is being created.
Can I ask about, Besa, you mentioned financial support that was given to Central and Eastern Europe in the run-up to the 2004 accession. What is your assessment in terms of support that's given from the EU in terms of pre-accession aid? I mean, we have the growth plan. This was announced. What's your assessment? Is Europe in a way supporting enough beyond the accession process, but in sort of financial support in transforming the region?
There have been and are all these projects that are all well-meaning and are trying to support the region to both converge economically and also implement other reforms in other areas that are fundamental for developing the countries. But the growth plan, and this is not my assessment, this is the assessment of economists who specialize on this, its ambition is to achieve up to 10% growth in the region by getting the countries to cooperate regionally, by improving its economic performance of individual countries, but also trade among the countries, and by implementing the different reforms that need to be implemented in economic systems. However, it has put forward about 6 billion euros over a period of years, most of which are in loans, and the grant component is assessed to be about 0.03 to 0.04% of the GDP of the region, which is, I mean, I'm not an economist, but I think it's pretty obvious that it's not going to have the effect that it's planning to achieve. So, no, I think in terms of the financial support that comes with the reforms, I don't think the region is supported enough in that respect. But if I can say something very quickly about the bilateral issues, which are currently posing challenges to even start the process for many countries. I've been discussing this recently and saying how behind these bilateral disputes also stands this, the EU that is unwilling to do more. And I've been challenged, to say, like, what does this mean? Like, what do you mean the EU should do more? These are all issues between two countries. And I think if enlargement becomes a priority, there's a conversation now about enlargement being more important, but if it becomes a true priority, I think member states would be negotiating and compromising in the same way that they did to get the Green Deal or to reach the migration deal, where you have an understanding among member states about what is and isn't essential for the accession process, and as a union decide to remove bilateral blocks from the beginning of the accession process, right? And I think this does need more effort and more involvement by member states who are proponents of enlargement, which I think we're not seeing enough today.
Can I maybe push both of you? Wouldn't, in a way, this idea of staged accession make sense both for the region as well for the EU, because it would sort of put the region in a waiting room where they can sort of get acquainted to the acquis and therefore sort of slowly build up for then becoming later a full EU member. While at the same time, I hear you, Besa, being more critical, seeing this as being stuck in the waiting room forever. Maybe, Minister, if you could start, and then Besa to complement. What is your view on this staged accession? It's often also seen positively as sort of regional cooperation, sort of really propping up, in a way, the region before fully entering the Union.
While I fully understand, but also fully endorse the fact that to be part of a club, you have to fulfill the obligations of the club, while you have to become a university student, you should have the necessary grades to enter. I strongly believe that if you start playing football, you should continue playing football, and the rules of the game cannot be changed during the game and say, oh, all right, we were playing football, but let's play volleyball. And now you can touch the ball with hand. I'm not being ironic. I'm just saying that it is important to keep the political focus in mind. It is important to understand that there is this willingness from approximately 20 million people in 6 Western Balkan countries that want to join a family called the European Union. It is the imperative of these 6 societies and democracies and administrations also that want to become part of the European Union. Let's not forget the European Union is the only political entity in the world that is expanding. And the expansion, the natural expansion, is in the Western Balkans, but also elsewhere in Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, why not? So this is what we should continue to see. Following what Besa was saying, do you know how much euros per capita do the countries in the Western Balkans gain from the European Union? 135 euros per capita. Meanwhile, countries full members of the European Union get more than 4,500. So you see the differences in this, and you see that gradual integration might mean lots of things, but we are here on the gradual integration for 20 years. I remember a different process, similar to this one, maybe more political and more straightforward, the Albanian succession to NATO. It started 23, 24 years ago. It seriously started 20 years ago, and we became members 5 years later. Nothing in comparison. These are completely different paths. There is one element that I see it in both processes. When you are not a member, when you are a candidate country, there is so much talks and discussions about it. But when you are a member, you don't understand very well those that are outside. And this is something that it's on us, the candidates, to do more and to work more and to show more and to engage more. And once again, thanks for this format, because it is helping. I also think that there can be also small but symbolic steps of putting the candidates into more engagement. We have been asking for several months, kindly asking and checking the possibility that the candidate countries, for example, can participate in the Foreign Affairs Council meetings. Listen to most of the debates the Foreign Affairs Council or the General Affairs Council are doing. Talk about fisheries, talk about taxation, talk about migration, talk about all the challenges that the members of the European Union are facing, but we are also facing. Because we are not distant, and the Western Balkans is right in the middle of everything that is happening in Europe and in the European Union.
Besa, your assessment on state succession, and what would be, I mean, very much here, the sort of political convergence, the financial support, but what would be in that period up to membership? What would be elements where you would want to see also more of a commitment? I mean, I've read, for example, the idea of, you mentioned the single European payment areas as a very sort of technical aspect, but some others said Erasmus. So, I mean, what would be sort of for you something that would give, from a regional perspective, life to that kind of gradual path?
So let's just be clear. no country in the Western Balkans is ready to join the EU today. Now, the argument that I've been making with the work that I've been doing here and sort of all the events that I'm attending is that no country will become ready if the process doesn't change, right? Because it has to be a credible process that shows that these difficult reforms that you're doing today will lead to eventual membership. I have looked at Croatia many years back. I was working in a think tank. Public administrations focus on what sort of political leadership focus, and if you're not sort of working towards the goal of EU accession, there can be other daily issues that take up the focus. So bringing the process back, making it credible, is essential for this reason. Now, to talk about joining the single market first, which, I mean, the fear in the region is that it would mean joining the single market only, is a bit of a question mark for a region that is poorer, and it's already having huge trade deficits with the EU. The questions that are rising are, will this only lead to brain drain and even further trade deficits with, of course, some growth, because this would be still a positive step, but not the type of growth that you get when you have the support and the relationship, the close relationship with the EU in an EU accession process like Croatia had, right? So this is the concern, that any of these other projects would do two things: would move the region away from full membership because everyone would accept that we can do something else instead, and in turn would not help with the quick growth and development that is needed.
Before we open up to the audience, can I ask you a tricky question, Minister? Now, in 2004, we opted for the Big Bang. Now, you're coming from a country that's doing rather well. That's also a country that has, despite the Greek case that we've just covered, but has much less minority issues. Now, wouldn't a regatta approach, which says we take Albania or Albania plus into the Union, sending a signal that enlargement is happening, wouldn't that be in your interest? Or would you say, no, realistically, we'll probably have a process where the whole region will come to the EU? I know it's very speculative, but I think it's a pertinent question.
I won't speculate on my reply. We will continue with the reforms without ifs and buts. We will continue delivering for our people without looking at the question marks. We will continue to deliver because what has been achieved has given so much progress to our society. Albania in the last years have become one of the most important attractions for tourists all around, at least Europe. And you feel it at the moment that you cross the border. You feel it that you enter into a European country. And I strongly believe that Albania is a European country in the Western Balkans, not the other way around. And this is the thing that we should continue delivering, and this is something that I think whatever the government will be in the office, whoever will be the foreign minister, the young people of Albania will continue to push forward for this, into this direction. No ifs and buts. Move towards the European Union as fast as we can, with all the capabilities, not finding excuses, not blaming the other, not going into history, not claiming fantasies that have created so much havoc in the region. Let's look forward.
Do you feel there is an element of countries being played against each other within the region?
I hope not, but there is an important element that we are seeing in the Western Balkans that is coming back into the Western Balkans after the wars in Yugoslavia, revisionism and relativization of history that left the region went. We saw it. We saw it in since the first war of aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine in 2014 and on, up until today. But it's coming back into the region. It's coming back, and it's being badly used, and it's creating situations that are really, really problematic. And I can give you a list of examples if you want.
I would like to open up. There are two very important points that we haven't really touched upon so much. One is the preparedness of the EU, which we deliberately have not put at the focus here, but I know a number of you have been working on that, and very welcome to also enter the discussion here. I'm looking particularly at you two from the expert group, Franco-German expert group on the institutional reform. And the other one is also, you hinted at this, is the fear of backsliding within the region. And some of the countries we haven't touched upon have just had a visit from China, who seem to hedge or focus on other options than Europe. So with that, I would like to open and give you the chance to ask questions to the Minister and Besa. And we have the microphone coming around.
Thank you very much. My name is Adi Čermanić, European Stability Initiative. I have a question, though I would like to respond to Besa's comments on the single market and our proposals, and of course shared positions on the staged accessions and other debates, but these debates are, in my opinion, over. They're done. What we have now is the new growth plan until 2027. We have these potentially small steps in the EU accession process, and as the foreign minister very diplomatically said in his keynote speech, we're looking towards what's going to happen after 2027. But I want to ask you about 2027, because we in public still don't have full details on what the reforms that are planned within the new growth plan with the European Commission. I want to ask you whether you can explain to us in a very political, descriptive way what will Albania look at the end of 2027 if all the reforms that are being discussed with the European Commission are actually implemented. What's the big idea behind the new growth plan? How would you sell it not just to your public but also to European public? What is it so big and so important that we will have by the end of that year?
But could you please also explain 2027 being the
year when the new growth plan will be finalized? So it's a plan for up until the end of 2027.
Exactly.
It is access to European Union funds that will help us strengthen developing also our mechanisms. These funds will not only be available for financial and economic development, but are funds that will help us strengthen the legislation that we have. And strengthening means making it as compatible as possible, as soon as possible, with that of the European Union. And the growth plan will diminish massively the gap that we have with the European Union. Will continue to give to the societies of Albania, Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, and North Macedonia tools in our hands to be European as soon as possible. To look at perspectives that are real and have also a deadline. I'm not saying this is paradise on earth. I'm not saying now we found the magic wand that will solve our problems. But this is the way that things can start changing, and can start changing with willingness. And I'm also aware of the long hours of discussions to reach consensus on the new growth plan. But this has created also a new rhythm in our administrations to start delivering. When it comes to the people in Albania are not focused on any debates like this. People in Albania are focused to make their lives better. To make their lives better by creating enterprises, by investing, by sending their children to good schools and better education, by bringing back whatever is earned and start developing. It's the duty of the administrations, it's the duty of the public mechanisms, governments, to make that sustainable and reliable. And I think we are in the best time to deliver properly, to deliver in a good manner and in a sustainable manner.
Can I maybe push you briefly on that? What, in terms of concrete sort of growth prospect, because we do know from the region, also from Albania, but even more so if I look at Kosovo, a lot of young people are leaving the country. And some of them are rather well educated. How is the situation for Albania there? And where do you see kind of the springs of hope in terms of further diversifying the economic base beyond tourism, agriculture?
20 years ago, the microphone is working better. 20 years ago, I remember I was reading my master's in London, right after the big Eastern Bank. And UK, France, and other countries, Germany included, were full of young, incredible students and people and workers from Poland and the Baltic states. Look where Poland and the Baltic states are 20 years later. All that investment that looked like brain drain from those countries has been paid back. I'm not simplifying. I'm not trying to put parallels on situations that are never the same. But let's not forget that where opportunities are, people will tend to get those opportunities, and it's the best thing that Albania and other countries in the region are having many young people working and studying and trying to get a better living in the European Union, and most of that investment will come back soon, has already started to come back, and all that progress that has been seen, particularly with regards to what is going on in Albania in the last two, three years, is also because of that. And it's not because of realities that have been created only through the beauties that my country has, but it's because of the people that are coming back, have started to invest as they have always done and will continue to deliver on it.
Can I get another question, or do you want to go reply to this straight away?
Actually, I want to link to what Adi was saying about, I mean, I agree that it seems that most of the debates about how to move forward in the Western Balkans, in this relationship between the Western Balkans and the EU, seem to be closed, and the growth plan is one project that is out there that is being looked at more seriously. But I do think it's important to still mention that you don't need a big bang enlargement anymore. I think having the countries progress at their own rate and then join the EU as they meet the criteria would be important. But for this to happen, it's paramount that all countries are in the race. So accession talks are opened with all countries, and then that would be putting the ball in the country's court and saying, okay, if you're meeting the criteria, we can move forward. If not, then you wait until you're ready, right?
Questions? We'll collect a bit. Yeah.
Milan, German Council of Foreign Relations. First of all, let me congratulate both the Jacques Delors Centre and Hertie for a very good event. Mr. Minister, it's not easy to have a full room for a Balkan foreign minister in Berlin. I know what I'm talking about. It used to be better. But here are two short questions, if you allow me, Johannes. One, the EU enlargement is no longer only a story with the Western Balkans or Turkey. Now we have also Ukraine, Moldova there. They are at the last meters of getting the EU negotiating framework, hopefully by the end of June. There is intensive discussion about some novelties there that might also apply to the other accession countries. What in particular is Tirana looking at there? One hint, QMV type of votes. My second question would be to address The other part of Albania is a partner of Germany, which is member of NATO. Questions being asked here in this EU capital is about burden sharing within NATO, within the European pillar, if the US engagement will go down. Where do you see Albania's contribution to Europe defense and security with the lower engagement of the US down the road?
Yeah, two excellent questions. Thanks a lot, Milan. But I would like to bring two in as well, even though it may be a slightly different thing. But I think it's good to collect and then go back to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the very interesting speech and discussion. It's actually not so. I have two small questions that are not so far from Milan's questions, and they both relate to QMV actually. So my first question is on introducing QMV in the accession process and the negotiation. So this is something that we also suggested in the Franco-German report that Johannes mentioned. Do you think this would help the process to close and open the chapters with QMV rather than unanimity, or does it simply delay the problem towards the end of the process, because then we will still need consent of all member states? And the second question relates to QMV, but more internally of the EU. So a lot of the discussions on absorption capacity, which Johannes mentioned, is about whether or not the EU will retain a capacity to act, will remain effective, efficient with more than 30 member states, and in some areas with more than 30 vetoes. And then one of the suggestions floating around, and this is not something we as a group suggested, but it is out there, is that new member states would not exercise their veto right until all member states move towards QMV in all policy areas. Is this something that you feel would help the process, and would it be acceptable for candidate countries actually to consider this idea?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much, too. So two blocks of questions. Please, Minister, do you want to start, Besa? Who takes the hot potato?
I can
do it. Don't worry. There's a door. I will kindly ask Milan to understand that I will not make comments. I will be a foreign minister saying some cliches, but happy to continue the discussion together. It is important to understand that where we live. And multilateralism is suffering, and it's not suffering today, it's suffering for at least the beginning of the century. But currently, we are not seeing any more facts and figures and details from different corners. We're seeing from opposing angles. And I'm talking about how we see every situation in our continent with our opponents. The Russian Federation is the aggressor. And it's waging a war of aggression against Ukraine with many implications in the entire European continent. Therefore, the only mechanisms that seem to continue working and delivering are the multilateral mechanisms like the European Union or NATO, where we have some minor differences of opinion, but we're talking about mechanisms when it comes to the European Union that are a constitution of liberal democracies that are thriving to create and to live on rule of law and free market economies. And this is where countries like mine, countries like those in our region, but also Moldova and Ukraine, to say the immediate few, want to become and want to enter. And this is where we, all these candidates, should not feel frustrated because of the new candidates coming. On the contrary, we should continue aiming to be more and more. Why not in the Southern Caucasus? Why not elsewhere? I would love to have Switzerland in the European Union or Norway, but that's a different discussion. So, whatever happens and whoever achieves, it's not about achieving something against the other. No, it's about creating a community of countries that will respond better to challenges. And I would link it with your second question with regards to NATO. Albania is doing its own set of commitments. We have reached 2.03% of the GDP dedicated to defense expenditure, and this is something that it will be one of the achievements of the NATO summit that will be organized in mid-July. But what is more important is that I don't believe that the United States of America, the country that helped Europe twice, at least, in the history of the 20th century, during both world wars, change, will disappear from Europe. There is one thing that is the political rhetoric, and there is another thing that is the reality. In the US, there has always been calls for isolationism and withdrawal from Europe, but the reality is that what we face and see today, including the realities in this beautiful country, is thanks to the engagement of the US through the Marshall Plan in the 40s and on. Everybody is waiting, specifically in the Western Balkans. There is this hypothetical change that if somebody will come into power, then that somebody will appoint that other one, and that other one will deal that and will do that, will change that. True, on the hypothetical thing. We like very much gossiping and looking into the future in a distorted way. And this is the problem that I was mentioning earlier, that because of this, we have stalled for a year. We have done nothing for a year, waiting for Godot to appear, but Godot will never appear. And the US will continue to deliver what has always been delivering with regards to the security infrastructure in our continent. Maybe, of course, with different conditions. But let's not forget that it's important also to build up, as future members of the European Union, contribute to the European Union defense. And we have already been doing it. And again, based on my personal background, it was impossible, at least 10 years ago, to discuss with European Union representatives a contribution from a candidate member. Now it's not the case. The European Union welcomes contributions from the candidate countries, and this is so positive and this is so important, because this will only bring to what I said at the beginning, that these functional international mechanisms like the European Union and NATO are delivering. Meanwhile, other organizations are miserably failing, like the OSCE or others that are unable to deliver on what is expected from them.
Could I push you on two second question? Could you? I mean, do you have some sympathy for those within the union saying, look, yet another set of veto players? We have taken with the large enlargement of the 2004 enlargement, some countries that are now turn out to be difficult on some of the consensus building that we're trying within the union. So, is the idea of a commitment that you will not exercise your veto power until QMV is introduced? Is that something that you could contemplate? It's been around as a suggestion. Of course, it also means that to a certain extent you forgo some of your fundamental rights if you were to enter then as an EU member. So what do you think about this? I mean, first, the sympathy for that view of saying that veto power is a problem, and secondly, is there a sort of unilateral possibilities that you think could help?
If the veto power is used for bilateral issues, it will continue to be used badly for bilateral issues, then we can open the Pandora box on the bilateral issues that everybody has against someone. So I strongly believe that by avoiding the mixture of bilateral issues with the veto power into the European Union, can create better dynamics and can create better future for the predictability of the process that we participate. When it comes to Albania, and hopefully Albania will become a full member of the European Union, rest assured that Albania doesn't have any issues with its own neighbors or its own partners. It has always been the other way around. So I'm really looking forward to my successors as foreign ministers engaging positively and proactively to make not only the immediate region but the entire neighborhood a better place to live.
Just very briefly, I think QMV would help. Yes, it would push the bilateral dispute to the end, where a decision with unanimity would have to be taken for a new member to be joining the EU. But it would keep the process going. It would incentivize reforms, and I think once all of the chapters are closed, it would be also much more difficult for the bilateral dispute to be present and say, okay, well, we're not accepting the country because there's this issue that is not necessarily related directly to the EU accession reform. But I do understand also the reluctance where member states are saying, well, we've created this union, this institution, where we all make decisions and we compromise, we negotiate. So we should all vote on important issues. But as you've pointed out correctly, and I think what your report specifies in very useful, I think, way, is that the intermediary steps are more technical. So for those, you don't need to have unanimity anymore. So if this would be actually accepted and approved, I think it would help the process quite a lot.
I'm opening up for further questions.
Hello, my name is Dimitra Kiranoudi. I'm a journalist at Deutsche Welle Greek department. And Mr. Minister, I would like to focus a bit on the Greek-Albanian relations right now, because as you mentioned before, Albanian government sees the Beleri case as a judicial issue. But the Greek government insists that it's a European issue, it's an issue of rule of law. And moreover, Fredi Beleri is also a candidate for the upcoming EU elections with the governing party of Nea Demokratia, Mitsotakis party. So, what do you reply to this? What is your comment? And because Greece raises also the issue of minority rights. I'm referring to the Greek minority in Albania, in Himara. And the second question is, how would you describe the Greek-Albanian relations right now?
Excellent. The Greek-Albanian relation has always been great. We have lived and coexisted in peace for centuries. My mother comes from Himara. We can speak in Greek now, but I think it will be the two of us and maybe a few others understanding us. Happy to talk to you later. The most important thing in all these aspects is one particular case cannot block the relations between two important countries, two important societies, two important peoples. There is an individual that was caught a year ago vote buying. And it's not me saying it. There is a legal process on that individual. Let's wait for the results of that legal process, because, as I said earlier today, any government should keep its hands off any legal process. Good luck to the elections in the European Union. Good luck to Nea Demokratia and its candidates. I really look forward to the results. But what is the most important thing is that whoever has an issue with how Albania and the Albanian government is behaving can check and can see it better and can scrutinize through the mechanisms that the European Union has created for Albania as a candidate country. That's why I refer once again to the opening of the first cluster, the fundamentals, where everybody can check commas, paragraphs, and full sentences in order to make the living of the Albanian citizens of whatever origin they might have better. And this is the most important thing. The most important thing is to help Albania strengthen its democratic institutions, and by doing so, everybody will have a better living.
Let's go on to the next question. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Fatma Dauti. I'm a business jurist working the last 5 years in the offshore wind in the private sector. But before that, I spent 3.5 years at the European delegation in Albania. So having that said, I do have understanding with all the EU bureaucratic rules, and also to make the connection with my main take from this discussion is that Albania as a government is feeling stuck, let's say, I don't know if I'm politically correct, but is not feeling the right progress towards the enlargement. And from the other side, the EU has its own rules for opening the discussions. I do rationalize with thinking of my government that when there is a certain level of input or feeling that the discussion should be opened in order to make more progress possible, I do appeal on EU to make that possible. Otherwise, I do not rationalize why these 20 years have been productive. That said, my question now goes to my government. I want to understand from their perspective how have we understood the feedback of EU that the negotiations cannot be open yet? What are our homeworks to do in that regard in order to join the zone of possible agreements, how you name it shortly, the ZOPA, in order to extend the best possible agreements from Albanian side, and also to reach the hand towards EU for their best possible alternative agreements in order to meet in the middle.
Thank you very much. Because we're approaching the end, and I would like to give maybe 1 or 2 other questions the space, and then we do a final round at the end. So there's these 2 questions, and then we wrap up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Erion Murati, and first of all, I would like to thank the Hertie School for organizing this event, because it gives us a place, a forum to constructively confrontate our representatives in Albania. I have been living the last 10 years in 2 different countries, first in Italy, where I graduated, and then in the last 5 years here in Germany, where I also got a PhD in Hamburg in European law. My question is not about the enlargement and about the question of whether Albania will join. I'm a very optimistic person, a European person, I would say, and I will believe that the integration will come. So Albania will join, that's for sure. Whether Albania will earn it, or it will work for it, or will be granted, that has to be seen. We don't know that yet. But that will happen. But my question is I'm a bit more concerned about a very dangerous issue that I see, which is the brain drain, the immigration flows from Albania to the European Union. There is actually a saying which says that, okay, if European is not coming to Albania, then Albanians will go to Europe. But I think that this problem will get worse when Albania will join European Union. And I can give you 2 simple facts. Like in 2020, the Eurostat released a study which says that there were 52 thousands new residence permit released to Albanian people. 52,000, that's a lot. When I read, I was somehow shocked because for a population of roughly 3 million people, in 2 decades, you will have more than 1 million people leaving the country. Now, after Albania will join the European Union, I think more people will leave. And we have the example of Bulgaria in 2007, where roughly 500,000 people left. Mm-hmm. Now, my question is, how will Albania deal with this? What are your plans? Because I don't see any real initiative on this. How will you stop people from leaving the country?
Okay,
That's
okay. Thank you very much. Final question, 2 rows before. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Johannes Lindner. I'm with GIZ, the German Agency for International Cooperation. My question would be, now that Ukraine and Moldova are just on the eve of starting the screenings for the accession negotiations, I think it's no secret that the European Commission quotes Albania often as a best practice example for this process to these newly joining candidate countries. What do you think are the success factors that makes Albania this best practice, and what may also be things that the European Commission may have overlooked when quoting this reference? If I may invite for some self-criticism here. Thank you.
Maybe I will just pick up the question of, on the brain drain. As someone who has lived abroad for many, many years myself, and now I'm back in the region. I worked in Albania, now I'm working in Kosovo. I think it is important to note that people move to where the jobs are, but people then go back if there's opportunities. And I think Estonia, Czechia, all of the countries that I've started my intervention with at the beginning are now actually getting their people back, but it took 20 years of joining, of being in the process of joining the EU and developing their economies. So as a firm believer of the EU accession process as a motor for development and growth, I think if we can keep the focus on this process and help the region grow, this issue will not necessarily be an issue anymore in 20 years from now.
I will start with a question of the colleague at the end of the room. It is important to continue delivering. As I said, no ifs and buts. There is the willingness of the vast majority of the Albanian people to make the country a member of the European Union and to continue being NATO allies. And the vast majority of the Albanian people are more than 93%. And there is nobody represented in the Albanian parliament that thinks it differently. This might sound like a cliche. It's not. And we should not put conditions. We should not say, because there is a problem, let's complain about that problem, and maybe by complaining and crying, somebody will feel better and will let us move. No, let's accelerate, because through reforms, through what the European Union and the European Commission in particular is asking from us, we are helping ourselves. We are helping strengthening the institutions of our own country. And the process will have an end, but let's not prejudice it. Let's continue delivering. It's tough to be said, but when you think of our country in different years, think of the country back in 2015, think of the country back in 2009, think of the country back in 1999, and think where we started off. And I'm pretty sure that comparative analysis will help us all understanding where we are. Again, I'm not saying that we have had fantastic progress, but I'm just saying that we have had such an incredible move forward. To To the gentleman here in the middle, have you visited Albania? If not, try to do so. You'll understand it yourself at the moment you enter, you cross the border, or you fly into the main airport. You'll feel the vibe, and it's not a process that these people in this room and several hundred understand. The simple people in Albania don't know at all what we're talking about. They're continuing to deliver, and what they are delivering is exactly what is doing the best service to their future and to our future as civil servants. And we will continue to do so, and they will continue to do so. And this is a dynamic that we should find the necessary vibe to continue making it happen. And I'm pretty sure that by understanding and looking at each other better, better dynamics will come. And the last thing is your name. If I got it wrong, Erion. Erion, get a plane, come with me tomorrow. 10 years now abroad, come and work with me as the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I'm opening the foreign service for people like you and others to come and join the ranks of Albania, come and give back to what Besa and I were discussing, to come and give back to the country a better perspective. Because I'm pretty sure that you and others here in this hall and elsewhere are able to make the difference and are able to help us all do something better. You are right on the numbers, we can make the calculations, and then you'll find an empty place, nobody will live. No, it's not true. Everybody's living and everybody's trying to work there. And we will not isolate the country, we will create a better country and a better working environment and a living environment for everybody, including you and your family, by contributing back. Like Besa, I got back myself to that country. Come back, bring others, and you'll see how we can, together, make it a better place.
Thank you so much, both of you, for this. Can I nevertheless, I mean, this was a perfect concluding remarks, but can I nevertheless add with one other positive note? And I think we've been critical both on the preparedness that we have to look at on the EU side, but also within the region. But I was very impressed at the same seat where you were sitting there, about 6 months or 4 months ago, we had the Irish Prime Minister there. And he was asked, so, what's your view on enlargement? And he said, 50 years ago, everybody looked at Ireland and said, not ready, they will swamp us, there will be brain drain. Why do we take the Irish on? Look at us now. So maybe that's a note of hope. Thank you.